MZTV.
In 2000 or 2001, I was in Toronto, Canada, giving a series of lectures at a hall there, and we were hanging out before the lectures began. There was this guy named Paul, and he was one of the organizers, and he said he was on a mission to hand out free Bibles to a bunch of people, probably mostly homeless people, the down and outers. And he had like 100 little pocket copies of the King James Version. And this is a guy who believed in the salvation of all, and I believe in the two Gospels, the sovereignty of God. He had the whole thing. God had given him the whole revelation, the eons, the whole thing. But I was puzzled, why is he handing out King James Version? And I challenged him on this. I said, you're handing out a book that says Holy Bible on the front, and yet in this Bible, because of the mistranslation of the Greek word aionion, the adjective for ion, age, aeonian, eons, a time word, but because of the mistranslation, eternal, people are going to get this, and if they read certain passages, such as Matthew 25:46, these shall go away into everlasting punishment, or 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, eternal destruction from the face of the Lord. I said there's so many places where the mistranslation of this word is going to make people think that God is an eternal tormentor. And you know what Paul said to me? He said, well, it's better than nothing. And I said, no, nothing is better. Nothing is better than giving people a wrong idea about God. You would be better employed just sitting here or being at home watching television than handing out the King James Version. And he was shocked. He was appalled. He was rather offended. I can see why. I suppose I wasn't very delicate about it. But I meant it, and I mean it today. It is better to have no idea about God. It is better to have a blank slate. It's better to be an agnostic than to have the wrong idea about God. And this is going to lead me to Paul's experience in Athens. There's a point there that has just been underemphasized, and it really jumped out to me lately. And I'm going to bring that to you today. I'm Martin Zender, the world's most outspoken Bible scholar. I make sense for a living. If you've heard that, I will verify that it is true. You're going to find that out today. And if you look at my other videos, you will see it. God makes sense. It's just that God makes sense. The God we worshipped in the past was not the true God, the God of organized religion. He made no sense at all. He was a hypocrite. He was cruel. And he was vindictive, and he was supposed to have a handle on things, but he didn't. But no, we have been shown the true God. And for that, I am thankful, and I'm thankful that you're here. So Paul is in Athens in Acts chapter 17. Now I'm going to start up here in verse 15. Now those who were conducting Paul led him as far as Athens, and obtaining a direction to Silas and Timothy that they may be coming most quickly to him, they are off. I like that wording there. They're off. Verse 16. Now while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, his spirit was incited in him at beholding the city being idol-ridden. Well, yes, we know the Greeks were a polytheistic lot. They had idols for a bunch of different gods. And Paul's spirit is incited. Paul is offended deep down at the misrepresentations of God. Well, these were actually not misrepresentations of God. These were images of false gods. Nevertheless, verse 17, indeed then, he argued in the synagogue with the Jews and with the reverent, and in the market on every day with those happening along. Now some of the Epicurean as well as Stoic philosophers parleyed with him, and some said, whatever may this rook be wanting to say? I took that verse to heart. In the NASB is really great. The NASB for Acts 17:18 said, "What would this idle babbler wish to say?" I thought it was so great that these people called the great apostle an idle babbler that I named my first newsletter The Idle Babbler Illustrated. But what they called him, concordant is correctly translated a rook. It's a bird like a crow that picks seeds. If you look at rook in the Concord version, you'll see a seed picker. What is this seed picker wanting to say? In other words, they looked at Paul as someone who just picks here, picks there, looks for loose ends, and doesn't really have any big picture together. He just dabbles in various philosophies or whatever. That was their idea of Paul. That was their thought of Paul. What would this rook be wanting to say? Yet others said, and this is being recorded by Luke, so Luke actually heard these guys say this. Wait till these guys wake up at the Great White Throne and realize that something they said at in a marketplace to a complete stranger is recorded in the scriptures. Others, he seems to be an announcer of strange demons, seeing that he brought them the evangel of Jesus and the resurrection. They thought that was an announcement of strange demons. These people were not too bright. Besides getting hold of him, they led him to the Areopagus, saying, "Can we know what this new teaching is which is spoken of by you? For strange is what you are bringing to our hearing. We are resolved then to know what this is wanting to be." I've always loved that. I think the NASB has, what is this thing wanting to be? It's like this thing is its own entity. This thing has a mind, and this thing wants to be something, but it's looking for an agent. It's looking for a host in order to tell the world what it is. Oh, these Athenians, they're killing me. They are just killing me. I gotta love these guys. There's part of me that really loves these guys. Verse 21, now all the Athenians and the repatriated guests had opportunity for nothing different. They must have had a great disposable income. They didn't work a lot. They had opportunity for nothing different than to be saying something or hearing something newer. I think the NASB says something new. Concordant correctly translates something newer. They're always wanting something different. You would think they would like a seed picker then, wouldn't you? I don't know. Now Paul, verse 22, standing in the center of the Areopagus. You can go there today. This is Mars Hill. That's the translation here. Areopagus, Mars Hill. You can stand today where Paul stood. Isn't that amazing? And yet I have no desire to do it. I don't know. I really don't have any desire to go to the Holy Land. I want to wait till I see the real thing. It's like, part of me would be really fascinated by standing on Mars Hill where Paul stood, but another part of me says, just wait till I meet the man himself. Paul, standing in the center of the Areopagus, averred, "Men, Athenians, on all sides am I beholding how unusually religious you are." They're probably in the audience going, "Yeah, that's right. Paul was insulting the hell out of them, but they didn't even realize it. I notice how unusually religious you are." Paul's very diplomatic here. It's much better than saying, "I notice you guys are superstitious as all get out." No, he doesn't say that. I notice how I behold how unusually religious you are. For passing through and contemplating the objects of your veneration, I found a pedestal also on which had been inscribed to an unknowable God. Here it is. Paul found a pedestal, not an idol, a pedestal, like a monument almost. Just being a pedestal tells me that they didn't have the audacity to build an image of what they thought this God was. But look where Paul puts his finger. I found a pedestal on which had been inscribed to an unknowable God. The next line is a thunderclap. But before I get there, I gotta give the Athenians credit. And Paul gives them credit too, for this is where he puts his finger. The Athenians had the wisdom to realize that their petty little deities were nothing compared to the unknowable God, capital T, capital U, capital G. They had an instinct that the true God would have to be so great and so high as to be unknowable. Their instinct told them that there was such a God, and that there being such a God, it would be impossible for him to be known. But they wanted to, they didn't want to take their chances and not honor this great God that they figured could not be known, so they had the decency to create a pedestal to cover their bases in case we missed it with this deity, this deity, this deity, and this deity. Let's make a pedestal but not put anything on it to the unknowable God. And what Paul says here just shakes me to my core. To whom then you are ignorantly devout, this one am I announcing to you. Whew. Paul actually gave them credit for being devout to a true conception of a God that is so great that one would think it would be impossible to know him. And then this little man from Tarsus walks into this den of intellectualism and superstition and idolatry and says, to whom then you are ignorantly devout, this one am I announcing to you. Paul knew the, quote, unknowable God. And so do we. And then this is no less of a thunderclap that follows. Verse 24, the God who makes the world and all that is in it. He, the Lord inherent of heaven and earth, is not dwelling in temples made by hands, as I'm sure he gestures to the temple he is standing in. Neither is he attended by human hands as if requiring anything, since he himself gives to all life and breath and all. Whew. I pray that in the next few minutes God can give me the right words to try to convey to you what I'm thinking here and how great this truly is. For all intents and purposes, a God as great as the one who makes the world and all that is in it, who is inherent of heaven and earth. How could such a deity, how could the ultimate deity, how could the deity be known by human beings? And yet, he reveals himself to little ones. He reveals himself through a son who came to the earth as a human being born in a manger in an insignificant city in Israel, reared in an even more insignificant city in Israel. It seems incredible. Ladies and gentlemen, we know this unknowable God because the Athenians were dead on. They were dead right. There was a God who was so high that he was above all, and that here was the absolute deity, and the human mind could not wrap around the fact that such a great one could possibly deign to reveal himself to humans. Their little idols were dedicated to small g gods who wished to remain anonymous, wished to remain unreachable, let's say, not anonymous, but unreachable, untouchable. Their greatness being protected by necessary ignorance. It somehow made them greater if people were ignorant of them, of their true nature. They needed this air of mystery around them, these false gods, in order to inspire the fear that they needed to induce worship and sacrifice. And these Athenians instinctively knew that there was a God above all these gods, but what they didn't know was that such a great one would wish to be unveiled, would wish to be known, the God who made the heavens and the earth. And that he, this great one, gave his counsels to this little man from Tarsus who happened to be wandering around the markets and was overheard by some representatives of the Areopagus who heard him discoursing upon this and that. Sounded intriguing. Let's get this guy on the show. They invited him to speak. And it's recorded for all time. It's recorded for all time. And Paul unveiled aspects of God that not even God's Son on earth revealed. It is so incredible that the God who makes the world and all that is in it longs to reveal himself, and he does it to the most insignificant people on planet Earth. Reveals himself to us. John 1:18 is a magnificent verse. Start with verse 17. John chapter 1 verse 17. For the law through Moses was given. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. Verse 18. God no one has ever seen. This is the one the Athenians instinctively knew must be. The only begotten God, speaking of his Son, Jesus Christ, don't be thrown off by that the only begotten God. He is not God personified. He is God represented. He's the image of the invisible God, because God no one has ever seen. Jesus Christ came to earth. He was seen. Therefore, he was not the absolute deity. But what does it say? He was begotten out of God, and he's worthy to take the titles of God. He's worthy to be called God representationally, not identificationally, but representationally. But I don't want to get stuck there. Let's go on. The only begotten God who is in the bosom of the Father. This one who created the heavens and the earth, Jesus Christ being in the bosom of the Father, he unfolds him. When I first saw this word in the Concordant Literal New Testament, wow, he unfolds him. His only begotten Son. The first thing I thought of when I saw this word unfolds was like a road map. Everything is hidden inside the map. But as you unfold the map, suddenly all the state lines or national borders, international borders come in the rivers and the mountains and the lakes, and you unfold it, and more of the vista comes into view. All the details of what is on the land and in the land, the shape of the land, the whole lay of the land. when you unfold that map. Jesus Christ unfolds the Father. Shows us the nature of the Father, that the Father himself is a lamb. Jesus Christ is a lamb. Because finally God, in the fullness of time, sent his Son. He no longer had to hide anymore behind curtains. It was necessary for a time to do that. No longer needed multiple sacrifices year after year after year. Now he could reveal his true heart after he set the stage of his greatness, of how distinct he is from humanity. Once that was established, now he wants to reveal his heart. He wants to unfold himself, and he sends his Son to do that. But even the Son, when he's on earth, does not unfold the full counsels of God, but rather he waits until his death, his entombment, and his resurrection. And then after he's been glorified, he reveals himself, he unfolds himself to this little man from Tarsus, the ex-Pharisee, who becomes the Apostle Paul, who walks into Athens, sees a pedestal dedicated to the unknowable God, walks in front of those people, hundreds of people perhaps, and says, "This one to whom you are ignorantly devout," he's giving them credit for being devout, "this one am I announcing to you." Isn't it easier to talk to people who really don't have any idea about God? This is why Paul put his finger on that pedestal, the unknowable God. Paul said, yes, a blank slate. I can work with this. They sensed it. There's a great one. I can work with this. He doesn't tap any of the other idols because they think they know that God. They think they know that God. They think they know that God. But there's a great one above all who is impossible to know. And Paul says, a blank slate. I can write on this. And that's where he puts his finger. And that's the one he begins to unfold to them as Christ unfolded to him, as God unfolded to Christ. You see how it goes down the line. God unfolds himself through Christ. Christ unfolds himself to Paul, and Paul unfolds the works of Christ in the person of Christ. And by extension, we see the nature of God, and he gives it to us. The God who makes the world and all that is in it has revealed himself to us. Think about that one.